back to the One Take Show podcast. In this episode, we are in conversation with Mr. Jaideep Reddy. Sir is a technology lawyer and he's a leader at Nisit Desai Associates. In this episode, we talk about one of my favorite topics, cryptocurrency and blockchain. I mean, obviously, a lot of people have a lot of opinion about whether we should legalize cryptocurrency, whether we should regulate it, or whether we should outrightly ban cryptocurrency. In this episode, we delve into the questions as to why do we need to regulate it and why do we need to accept cryptocurrency, and if there is to be an argument made against cryptocurrency, if we are to ban cryptocurrency, what could be the possible reasons, and if there is any middle ground that we should reach, because cryptocurrency and blockchain is going to control major part of our transactions in the future and how we are going to survive as identities are being created through blockchain and how we are going to assimilate within the same. And to have this enriching, really valuable conversation with someone like Sir, who has established so much in his own experience and someone who can really add so much value into our own lives through his knowledge, I think this is the kind of episode that was indispensably required on this podcast. If you like this episode, which I'm 100% sure you will, please make sure you like, share and subscribe to the channel. If you have any suggestions or feedbacks, write them down in the comment section. I would love to read them. So ladies and gentlemen, let's jump right in. Hello, sir. Welcome to the One Take Show. It is truly an honor for me to have this amazing opportunity to have this incredible conversation with you. I've been looking forward to this episode for so long, and finally, this episode is being created here. Thank you so much for taking time off your really busy schedule and sitting down with me for this amazing conversation.
Thanks, Kaustubh. And we've miraculously coordinated on LinkedIn to get this done, whereas most people do it on email and WhatsApp. So good. We finally got a time scheduled and looking forward to it.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. So before we begin with the topics that we have decided for this conversation, and I'm sure everyone would really enjoy learning about them, something that is very contemporary, also something that is catching traction as we see technology law becoming more and more popular amongst law students, at least, and all the legal aspirants. They all want to learn more and more about it. But before we get into that, I think it is important for every viewer of this podcast to learn a little bit about you from your personal experience. So, starting from the very beginning, what inspired you to get into law? What inspired you to go through the law school and finally work in technology law? What was that experience like, sir?
Sure. So I would say, like most people who end up doing what they're doing, it was somewhat accidental, but also a mixture of interest as well. So I did an interesting course by Miss Chinmayi Arun, who's now at NLU Delhi. She offered a course at NUJS called Comparative Communication Regulation. So she took us through the work of leading tech law scholars like Jonathan Zittrain, Lawrence Lessig, etc. So that essentially got us thinking through the issues in internet regulation and internet policy, how law acts as code. How code acts as law and vice versa also. So that was a seed sown in my brain. And then I started to work at Samvad Partners in Bangalore. And Bangalore being the tech capital, obviously there were a lot of tech companies who either were our clients or we advised VC funds who were investing in them. So we were looking at various issues. We advised taxi for sure quite closely. So there were, and at that time there were a lot of tricky and ambiguous issues with how to regulate taxi aggregators. So those kind of issues got me interested because it was becoming clear that whenever you have a new internet-based business model, generally it doesn't fit that clearly into the existing law. So I found those legal issues interesting. But I would also find any other issue, even if it's not tech strictly speaking, if it presents an interesting area of interpretation, I would find those issues interesting as well. It just happens to be that tech law brings the most number of these issues because the business models are so new. So I did then a master's at Berkeley where I got focused on law and tech uh, and that got more and more embedded into that. And at Nishit Desai, obviously, the firm is well known for looking at emerging technologies closely, anticipating new issues. And I got into blockchain somewhat by happenstance. One of the senior leaders said that why don't we write a paper on blockchain? So I was like, yeah, why not? I had come across it, but that really got me deeper into it. And so we do a variety of work in payments, privacy, blockchain, fintech, OTT regulation, content regulation, e-commerce. So wherever there's an internet company, generally we're kind of there trying to be on the cutting edge.
Right, sir. And I think this is as auspicious as it gets, because it was very recently that I was reading about blockchain. And something that struck me was how even our government, many other governments across the jurisdictions, are now sort of promoting moving towards blockchain. There is a draft discussion paper which is out by Niti Aayog, which talks about blockchain as a possible alternative and what kind of an impact will it have on the Indian regulatory structure. There's a proper discussion paper out there. So before I ask you my first question, so I think it is only pertinent that I ask you a first follow up here. Is that when we talk about blockchain, we talk about all these different multiple areas of engagement, juxtaposition of law and technology. The companies that now need the protection of legal provisions, but still there are ambiguous provisions as well because of the technological advancements. How do you see this entire horizon expanding? How do you see the various developments happening in this field?
Sure, sure. So it's always a tug of war between law and tech, right? It's started from the dot-com time to, I mean, even prior to that, even when motor vehicles came about. I've told this anecdote before, but for those who haven't heard it, when motor vehicles came about, I think there was a regulation, either in London or New York, I'm forgetting, where they required somebody with a red flag to go behind every motor car, because that's how they regulated trains. And so this new thing came about, which they thought was very dangerous, could cause accidents. Motor cars were obviously not as reliable as they are now. So it was a new phenomenon, and they had to kind of adapt the laws to deal with it. So it's always a tug of war, and obviously now we have much more progressive regulations on cars. But the same way, I mean, every new technology has created its own legal issues. The internet brings a lot of both positives and negatives. It has all kinds of negative elements to it. But we don't kind of react by saying, let's ban it. So I think the same approach should be adopted with blockchain and cryptocurrency. They are a platform technology, in my view. So they can be used for both positive and negative purposes. And obviously, we do need a new set of amendments and provisions. We as a firm have recommended some of them to the government to both protect consumers as well as preserve innovation. That's the mandate of the constitution. So I think that this is a kind of it's a tried and tested uh, playing out of events for every new technology. It continuously is a tug of war. So let's see how it goes.
Well, it is only pertinent that you mention cryptocurrency here, and as you've talked about, that it is a constant tug of war. One alternative, obviously, is to constantly ban them, which I think is a reaction, a more comfortable reaction to the populace, because anything that we don't necessarily understand, we try to move that away. But the recent reactions from our government has been very interesting. It has been a sparred over area and has different connotations. We see the central bank giving out rather negative negative reaction to cryptocurrency, whereas the judgments are somehow different. So this entire case of cryptocurrency, where how do you evaluate that in the current scenario? How do you see, is that something that our country should look into, or is that something that our country is even ready for a discussion, nonetheless implementation?
Yeah, look, so the mandate of our constitution, the values we've chosen, is that people have the right to own property, people have the right to do business and the freedom of trade. the right to privacy, etc. So these are all rights given to the people, which can only be curbed by reasonable restrictions. So I think those are the values we need to follow. It is not a parental state who says, I will decide what is good for you, and if I don't think cryptocurrency is good for you, I can ban it. It has to pass the constitutional muster of, is this the only way to protect the consumer interest, to protect the public interest, or to protect some other value which is which is competing with the fundamental rights. Now you have lakhs of Indians who are participating in this ecosystem in one way or the other. Not just traders or investors, you have talented software developers, graduates of premium institutions. You have enterprises also using blockchain technology, which uses cryptocurrency. So you have this entire set of participants who are all just exercising their fundamental rights to trade and do business in the way they deem fit. So the only way to introduce a regime would be to it has to pass the test of reasonable restrictions. And other countries have shown us that you can successfully regulate crypto without a ban. You do have countries like the US, Japan, Singapore, Australia, etc. It's not that they don't want to protect their general public. Uh, they do want to do that, but at the same time, they recognize that an outright ban is not called for. So we should look to those kind of models as well as our own constitutional values and come up with a balanced frame.
Right, sir. As you say that there are countries who are at this stage somehow regulating the cryptocurrency while also having a concern for their citizen, concern for the economy. And there are some mega brands, huge companies who are now accepting cryptocurrency, for example, Tesla. So it is not something which is so abnormal or something that will just open the Pandora's box. It is happening around the world. But still, for example, RBI came out with a notice in 2019, which was very negative towards cryptocurrency. Why is there, if we are to play devil's advocate at this place and we are to somehow understand the position of our regulatory authorities having this negative outlook towards cryptocurrency, why is that negative outlook, and is that negative outlook justified to some extent?
Yeah. So I'll try and give you the best case for a ban, right? So essentially, some of the arguments are these assets are highly volatile. Therefore, consumers who invest in them can lose their money very fast, and we would want to protect consumer losses, right, due to wildly fluctuating values. Another point is because of the anonymity or pseudonymity in these cryptocurrencies, they can be transacted across borders without being able to trace the identity of the users. And therefore, they can be used in illegal activities, money laundering, etc. Another major reason is they can act as a competing currency to the sovereign currency, and therefore may impact the monetary stability, or the financial ecosystem or the payment ecosystem. Another one is about the energy consumption, that they consume a vast amount of energy. Now, all of these do have rebuttals. I have, in fact, dealt with it in detail in a paper of mine in Indian Journal of Law and Technology. Maybe I can share it with you and you can put it in the description. Where I have dealt with each of these points, and not just me, others have made some of these points as well. For example, when you talk about volatility, the stock market has suffered from wild swings as well. You have certain stocks which have lost almost their entire value in a single day. You have the index itself has resulted in some losses on some days have resulted in lakhs of crores of losses to the investor community at large. I've cited some of these instances, but essentially, yes, crypto is highly volatile, but volatility alone can't be the reason to ban it. In the securities market, you have a securities regulator who tries and controls the market. So you can have various protective mechanisms to ensure that there are no malpractices in price manipulation, or that if there are too wild swings in a single day, you have circuit breakers so the trading is stopped. For instance, I mean, I'm just placing it on the table. I'm not saying that this should be adopted or not. But the point is, you can have a regulator who examines it and comes up with solutions to it. So it's not inherent to crypto. There are other asset classes by which people have lost money. Um, there are various companies which have lost, and the entire value has been wiped out. The other thing with anonymity and money laundering is uh, where the investigating agencies have actually been able to use the blockchain, because one important point is that all blockchain transactions, at least public blockchain, are publicly available, so anyone can see them. So if an investigating agency wants to take a sophisticated approach, often they can, by using a variety of forensic tools, actually trace the entities behind a given wallet address. And the FBI, for instance, has been able to crack some cases using these forensic techniques to bust some child pornography rings, etc. So it in fact can be more traceable than cash, when you talk about anonymity and pseudonymity, because cash is much arguably harder to trace. The other thing was, for instance, energy consumption. So yes, Bitcoin is does consume a lot of energy, but you have now various other alternative cryptocurrencies. Some of them developed by the best professors at MIT, etc., which don't consume as much energy. They are actually much more energy efficient. So the world may move towards them. Like with any new technology, the first use case may not always be the most efficient. People will build upon it and improve on it, and in fact create more efficient solutions. Taking the cars example again, the cars now are much better than 100 years ago. So the technology will evolve and negate that. On financial stability, the Supreme Court also recognized this, because the RBI made this argument that it may upset the monetary system. But what the Supreme Court said is, look, there's no evidence, and not that there has to be evidence of damage. At least there has to be some evidence of forecasted damage. Of that also, there has been none, and you have well-known global entities also which have conducted studies and analyses. And while they say that yes, we should monitor this issue, they've not found a threat to financial stability. And this is obviously, they are the best economists at their disposal. So most of the arguments against crypto are, yes, they should be looked at and addressed, but it is not that they call for a ban, because either there is a way to regulate it, or there is some other phenomenon which we recognize in our daily lives, which has the same aspects to it, and we have found a way to regulate those. So, long story short, regulate, don't ban.
Right. I think this should become the mantra as we see the current
Because
culture as
some
it.
people are catching on to it. Yeah, but yeah.
I'm surely jumping on that bandwagon nonetheless. But I think this is very, very interesting. But somehow there is this attitude of precaution, a sense of precaution here. If I am to take an extreme stance, for example, if I am to go to the complete opposite of whatever is the precaution that we're trying to, if I ask you that what if yes, tomorrow cryptocurrency, as you've shared a concern, becomes a parallel to the sovereign currency, what if it does become that powerful? Is that really supposed to be bad thing for the regulatory authorities?
I mean, as of now, the values we've chosen are that the Reserve Bank of India is the monetary regulator and needs to have control over the currency. But there is no law, interestingly, that prevents you and I from exchanging some other means other than rupees to use as a means of exchange. For example, I can give you my mobile phone, you can give me some other item which you think is equivalent in value. And there is no law saying that no, you should have paid only in rupees. Barter is as old as the ages and has been
Right.
recognized from the oldest cases.
Hmm.
and I mean, money was essentially a way to make barter more efficient, because not everyone would need what the other person had, so they had to find a common means of exchange. But yes, if it becomes a currency, then there may need to be a monetary regulator. Uh, but that doesn't mean that something which can be used as a means of exchange is inherently unlawful. So there's nothing to stop me from giving you a bar of gold, you giving me 2 bars of silver. So in that sense, I have paid you with gold, and gold is a currency, and you have paid me with silver, and silver is a currency. But we don't ban any of that. Similar thing is with an exchange offer, right? I buy a new fridge, I pay a part of the amount with an old fridge, and I pay a part of the amount in cash. So I'm using the old fridge as currency, right? So all of those are, I mean, valid and legal transactions. So I mean, the central government, I mean, the RBI does have jurisdiction over the monetary system. There's no doubt about it. The Supreme Court has held it. The Supreme Court has held that the RBI has jurisdiction over cryptocurrency as well, because it has an impact on the may have an impact on the monetary system. So the RBI can take measures. In fact, the RBI does take measures over, for example, the import of gold. The RBI supervises the Foreign Exchange Management Act. So we regulate foreign currencies, right? Not just Indian currency. So, in fact, and one of the leading thinkers in this field has proposed that should we regulate crypto as foreign currency? So that's also another viable option, because it is some would argue it's a currency other than Indian currency, and that's how FEMA defines foreign currency, any currency other than Indian currency. So if RBI clarifies that, that is one option. So I wouldn't say the RBI doesn't have jurisdiction to take a step in this regard. But yeah, if RBI does have the jurisdiction to treat it as something other than Indian currency and regulate it accordingly, because it will never become Indian currency until the RBI puts a stamp on it, because the RBI has the sole right to issue legal tender in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we'll have to see how to play that balance.
Mm-hmm.
But you have other countries who have successfully told.
Right, right. So this is very interesting. I think one way to look at it is obviously to understand how RBI can potentially regulate it and how it can be juxtaposed to our national sovereign currency, as you say. And these are obviously the steps that can be taken. But with the current narrative that we have, and this is a setup for my another question that I'll follow up after this one, is with the current narrative, do you see our government or perhaps RBI showing any acceptance towards cryptocurrency in the near future?
Possibly, I mean, the recent statements have been a little ambiguous to interpret. They have said
Mm-hmm.
that they will take a calibrated approach, etc. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you have a global wave of the biggest of the big names,
Mm-hmm.
either getting into crypto as investment or payment. Visa
Mm-hmm.
recently announced that they would enable their merchants to accept a certain type of cryptocurrency. As
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned, Tesla is
Mm-hmm.
quite bullish on cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm.
They put 1.5 billion of their reserves in it.
Mm-hmm.
PayPal allows its users to hold Bitcoin. You have the biggest of the investment fund managers like Fidelity, which holds 7 trillion of client assets, which has digital asset custody division. I think Morgan Stanley had made a move as well. Harvard and MIT have crypto and blockchain courses. So it is not like this is kind of some under the radar suspicious activity. If the tech doesn't speak for itself, at least these big names should kind of give some comfort to all those concerned that there is genuine value in this. So let's see. I mean, hopefully, India has always been an important center of technology. So hopefully, we'll retain that status even for crypto and blockchain.
Absolutely. I hope we do. But if in case we don't, somehow, if in case we decide that we don't want to move ahead with the cryptocurrency for whatever reason, what is the opportunity cost here? What is it that we will be missing out on that potentially India as a country or the government should capitalize on? For example, Japan has capitalized on it. As you talked about, other countries are capitalizing on it, and they are capitalizing it based on their own regional factors, their own economic factors that they are taking into consideration. What would be the opportunity cost for India?
Sure. And I think to understand this, one should also understand that crypto and blockchain is a platform on which there are a variety of applications that can be built. It's similar to the internet in a certain way, which is why it's called the Internet of Value. Now, when the internet was first coming about, one only thought of one or two use cases, right? Email being the most relevant to exchange messages. People thought of internet as a way to exchange messages. Yes, that's essentially what it is. But everyone knows the internet is about so much more than email now. You and I are talking in completely different cities using the internet, right? Just like that, I think there is a mindset among some to think of crypto as just trading and trading of Bitcoin, right? Not even other cryptocurrencies, trading of Bitcoin, right? One has to understand that Bitcoin was the first, but there are so many others with multi-purpose applications. The Ethereum network being the most prominent, which allows you to do a variety of things on the internet, from voting to financial sector use cases, to content related use cases, intellectual property use cases. Right now, a popular example which has come up of late is something called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. They are essentially a digital kind of ownership certificate over a piece of a digital or physical asset. Say you have a work of digital art, you created it, you put it on Instagram, you want to monetize it, right? You can create an NFT out of it, and you can sell it online. And every time that work gets sold, you pre-program a royalty into it. So every time somebody, in turn, the seller sells it, you get 10% of the proceeds automatically. It's programmed into the token itself, right? So that's the kind of innovation blockchain empowers, which was not possible before. So now you're moving from banning something that a trader would have done or a software engineer would have done, to banning something that, say, a student of a design college would have done, right? So as more and more blockchain use cases come about, because it's just a platform to create any kind of thing. Just like you create multiple things on the internet, you can create anything which involves transfer of value, you can generally create it on the blockchain. So as soon as you say, for example, no one shall hold cryptocurrency, and you define cryptocurrency very widely, you would be depriving this entire economy. Whatever use case comes, whether it's now somebody, for example, if they create voting on the blockchain using a token, India won't be able to adopt that because it's banned, right? So anything which involves a token on a blockchain would then become banned, and so we would lose out on all those innovations. And the hope of the community and everybody who's kind of thinking reasonably on this issue is that we would not want that to happen. Similarly, you have cost savings in cross-border remittance. Some of the blockchain products have shown that you can save up to 60% of the cost in cross-border remittances. And India receives up to, I think, 80 billion a year in inward migrant remittances, which is the most of any country. And if you take, say, a cost of 4 to 5% of that, which is a reasonable estimate based on some reports, and then you shave off 60% of that, you still save thousands of crores. So it is a pretty big deal in that sense as well. So hopefully all these use cases will be appreciated, and it will be seen as something more than just speculation or use for underworld activities and things like that, because there are so many of these genuine use cases.
Right, sir. I think this is so rich with so much information, because obviously I have just read about NFT. I think this is a very naive example, but I just came across one of the NFT tokens of Cristiano Ronaldo being sold for some $1 million, and somehow created a buzz in this token industry that was being created for the sport persons. And I never realized what kind of an opportunity it creates for everyone who's perhaps working on this industry or is related to this industry, and how much we would be missing out if in case we are not caught up with this, something that we should not just only be aware of but be actively participating in, and not just as a nation but every individual person should be aware of these things. This is absolutely fascinating, something that I never ever thought about. More so because now I think it is also, as you mentioned, something which requires an attitude shift. People need to also start accepting cryptocurrency. My question to you here, one of the last questions obviously, is about how can regulatory authorities, governments, or perhaps RBI can instill that faith in people, apart if in case they do decide to change their approach towards cryptocurrency in the very first place. The recent example being RBI talking about regulatory sandboxes, which was very interesting in a way. But a move like this, is that enough for the populace to have a generation of that trust towards cryptocurrency or blockchain or any of those technological advances?
Yeah, so sandboxes are an interesting idea, and some people have proposed it in the context of crypto. But sandboxes are essentially a framework to make relaxations in an existing framework. So, for example, you have, say, a stock exchange regulation. Somebody has come up with something innovative and wants to pilot something, could say, has created a new type of model of stock exchange, but is not able to meet the net worth requirement, for instance. Then they can come under the regulatory sandbox, ask for an exemption from SEBI, and say that, look, I'm not able to meet this, but my product is innovative. So please relax this requirement for a temporary period. Now, for crypto, how it would work would be interesting because right now there's no financial sector framework which squarely governs it. Unless the RBI is to, for example, deem crypto as foreign currency or deem it as a payment system, both of which it has not done, and it is stated that crypto is not covered by either of those. Then creating a sandbox, which is just a framework for relaxation, may be a bit tricky. But yes, I mean, a sandbox gives quite a bit of leeway to the regulator to create a customized license. So it can be done, but then you are restricting the entire innovation to just one or two or three or four or a limited number of entities who actually qualify for the sandbox. Whereas you have actually lakhs, tens of lakhs of people participating. And so they would all kind of be left out of the framework. So it may be better to create a framework itself so that it includes a much wider variety of people, and also protects consumers at the same time. I mean, every time a new model has come, there has been a framework sooner or later created. Hopefully, it will be sooner. But for instance, you look at prepaid payment wallets, right? You look at your MobiQuicks and earlier Paytm. Now Paytm is a payment bank, but there are so many of them, Ola Money, etc. They are regulated by the RBI's prepaid payment instrument directions. Even the Payment Systems Act only came in as recently as 2007. And then that regulated card networks, ATMs, and various other of these payment systems. So it would be difficult to say that, okay, look, let's regulate credit cards under a sandbox, or let's regulate prepaid wallets under a sandbox, because you're kind of restricting the entire ecosystem. It's better where there is something so different, and where there's so many people participating, maybe better to create a new framework altogether. But I mean, there is still some leeway to do some interesting things with the sandbox. RBI has actually excluded cryptocurrency from its sandbox, but I mean, SEBI also has a sandbox. There is a new regulator in the gift city called International Financial Services Center Authority, which is focused on India as an offshore financial center. They also have a sandbox, so it can be used to interesting effect. So let's see how it. Let's see how it plays out. I think we shouldn't rule it out, but
Mhm.
one would prefer that there is a specific regulatory regime instead of a sandbox.
Right, right, absolutely. So, I think this is something that I consider myself an enthusiast of this area of law. I definitely need to watch this episode once again, go through everything, and so that I can start researching on each and everything that has been spoken about. That you have very interestingly given us some of the most valuable insights about. Uh, I truly am grateful for this entire conversation, everything that we have talked about. Before we wrap this up, sir, I won't take much of your time. Do you have any closing remarks for our viewers?
Stay curious, keep learning, work hard, and don't get bogged down by the pandemic.
Thank you, sir. I think everyone would love to live up to those words. I had a wonderful time. I'm truly again grateful for your time, for all of this knowledge that I believe is indispensable for anyone who's trying to stay up to date with anything that is happening in the legal world. So thank you so much for this opportunity, sir. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Kaustubh. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir.